Hello everyone and welcome to this video. This video is a selection of videos and reviews that I've done on the Sigma 500mm APO F4.5 EX DG HSM hypersonic prime lens. So I've done a selection of videos to highlight the quality of this lens because it is a unique lens and it came out in 2005. So what we're addressing here is the quality of the lens, the difference between full frame versus APS-C crop sensor cameras. We've done lens tests to check the sharpness in regards to looking at patterns and pixel peeping to see how good this lens is. We've done a real world samples test so we can have a look at real world images, not just test charts. We've done a video test to test both full frame and APS-C to see how quick focus is in video. And we've also done sharpness and contrast test and pincushion distortion test. And we're looking at the contrast on bricks in one of the videos to double check and see how sharp this lens really can be, both on full frame and APS-C cameras. So I've done a selection of videos here, so hopefully it won't be too boring for you. I may repeat myself in some of the videos, so I do apologise for that, but just bear with me with that. What I plan on doing is in the description box I will put a selection of times so you can find the relevant video for you which you might find interesting. So it means you won't have to sort through the entire selection of videos in this montage video that I'm creating. I would appreciate if you subscribe to the channel if these videos are helping you and you do find them interesting. More importantly, please like the video. If you think it's a good thing I've done, the content's great, you know, some of it may be funny to you, and I appreciate any sort of positive or negative feedback you would like to leave, but please try and keep it polite if you can. And like I said, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my content, and you know, leave any comments you feel that would be justifiable after watching this. So thank you for watching. I'll leave you now to watch the videos, and thank you for coming to my channel.
Introducing the 500mm f4.5 EXDG APO HSM prime lens. With a large aperture, high-speed super telephoto lens, inner focusing system technology. Introducing the Sigma 500mm f4.5 DG APO HSM ultra telephoto prime lens, designed for full frame sensors but may also be used with smaller APS-C size sensors. The lens incorporates autofocus and manual focus, and it gives you a limitation on a limiter on focus, such as full, 8 meters to infinity and 4 to 8 meters. Very handy for sports and wildlife photography. The 500mm is a unique focal length, and its large fixed aperture of 4.5 makes it great for photographing wildlife. A hypersonic motor, HSM abbreviated, ensure quite accurate and high-speed autofocusing, working together with an inner focusing system which enables additional speed and responsiveness while their overall length does not change during focusing. The minimum focusing distance is 400 centimeters or 157.5 inches. The lens includes a rear insertion 46mm filters with provision for easy rotation of polarizing filters. The tripod collar on this lens is unique. It has contoured grooves in the actual mount for easy hand holding. The actual mount screw itself secures very tightly and is very easily adjusted. The lens construction is 11 elements in 8 groups with an angle of view 5 degrees at 500mm. Surprisingly compact for its focal length, the 500mm is approximately 14 inches long and weighs slightly less than 7 pounds or just over 3 kilograms. The minimum aperture is f/32, featuring 2 ELD extraordinary low dispersion glass elements provide optimum color correction and sharpness throughout the entire zoom range, and a new multi-layer lens coating technology and lens design formula reduce flare and ghosting. Designed for full frame sensors, but may also be used with smaller APS-C size sensors with a corresponding effective increase in focal length, 750mm in most cameras. Also compatible with the Sigma APO teleconverters to provide additional focal length as a 700mm f8 or 1000mm f11 lens. So finally, let's talk about the build quality. The 500mm Sigma prime lens F4.5 DG HSM. It is built like a tank. It is fantastic build quality. It is made out of steel, heavy durable materials, and it will survive drops. It is fantastic, highly recommended, and thank you for watching.
Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. This is part 2 of my overall review of the Sigma 500mm EXDG for F4.5 prime lens. So in this video I'm going to briefly talk about the lens, why I think it's really good, and I'll show you some examples at the end. And this is a video that quite a few people have requested, so hopefully this video will be informative. So how much does the lens weigh? It weighs about 3 kilograms, the same weight as the 150 to 600 sports lens, so it weighs the same. I'd probably say it's probably quite a bit sharper because it's a prime lens. I did say it has a zoom focal range in my last video, but I was just reading off what Sigma said. It's a fixed focal length lens, so it doesn't zoom, just keep that in mind. It has a max aperture of f4.5, so it lets in a lot more light than the Sigma contemporary or sport lenses. In terms of elements, it has 11 elements in 8 groups versus the contemporary and sport 150 to 600 zoom lenses. The contemporary has 20 elements in 14 groups, and the sports lens has 24 elements in 16 groups, so a lot more elements there. Obviously the less elements you have, the more light gets transmitted. It does have 2 SLD low dispersion elements in the lens. Build quality, I would say it's really rugged and very well made. It seems to be made completely out of metals, unlike the Sigma contemporary and the sport lens. The sport lens does have a lot of aluminium in it. However, I wouldn't say it's quite as durable as this in terms of build quality. Now, in the day when you could buy one of these lenses, it doesn't have image stabilization, keep that in mind. I'm not fond of Sigma's image stabilization because it doesn't tend to be that great, versus Canon and Tamron and Nikon's versions of the image stabilization. It does have a drop-in filter. You can put in 46mm filters in there, and it has a rotation barrel there that allows you to rotate the actual polarizer, which is really handy, and then obviously it's lost back in there. Its minimum focus obviously is quite long at 4 meters. and it goes all the way. It has 3 modes basically: 8 meters to infinity, full, and 4 to 8 meters. Has full-time manual focus. Has full-time manual focus, and actually has a selector mode there for manual autofocus and manual mode, obviously. The actual tripod mount is really nice because it has contoured grooves. If you've seen my introduction video, you'll be able to see that close up. But it's really handy for carrying around. It is really comfortable in the hand. Unlike Canon's prime lens that is just quite flat and solid, it's not, I would say, as comfortable to hold as this is. And there is multiple screw-in mounts on there, like a 1/4 inch and your standard normal threads for your tripod mounts. It is a big lens and it is heavy, so it will become quite tiring for a while. After a while, the actual mount itself is easily rotated to portrait mode or landscape mode, whichever you want to do. So it is quite handy. Focusing is quite quick. In low light it's pretty good. In terms of image quality, I'd say it's pretty much on par with the contemporary sport lens in quality. When I did some testing, I found the lens is more or less comparable in quality. Obviously, if you stop this lens to f8, your images significantly become more sharper. And in that respect, because it's a prime lens, it easily beats the Sigma contemporary and sport lens, easily. Obviously, you've got no image stabilization, but I found Sigma's image stabilization to be quite poor, if I'm honest with you. I tested that on the Sigma contemporary and sport lens and the 17-50 standard EX zoom lens that I had. I found image stabilization, while they rated it at 4 stops, I was more, in real world examples, I was only getting about 1 stop, maybe 2 at a push. Even Canon's basic 300 F4 lens gives you 2, and that gives you 2 stops. You know, when Canon says they give you 2 stops, you get 2 stops. With the other lens that I tested, the 100-400 Mark II lens, sharpness on that was pretty good, obviously, but I found the image stabilization on that lens at 4 stops to be 4 stops. So when it comes to image stabilization, I'm not a big fan of Sigma when it comes to that. So don't be too concerned about getting a lens that doesn't have image stabilization. Use a tripod, monopod, and you get around that. And really, talking about the build quality, it's really solid. I have no qualms over the build quality, the condition. This particular lens, it cost me about £1,500, so you can pick them quite cheap. Try and get yourself a good copy, because some of them are well beat up, and some companies do try and sell them for £1,500 in poor condition. You really want to be spending £1,500 in good condition. And if you're someone who's into wildlife, 500mm prime is the end goal to get a lens like this. I'm going to show you some examples now, but I just wanted to briefly talk about the lens and give you an idea of how good I think it is. It comes with a decent lens hood, which is all made out of metal, very solid, a little bit of rubber on the end, just like the Sport one. The only thing I think about it that's negative, it's a bit on the short side. It could do with being a bit longer, but all in all, I think if you're looking for a prime lens to do wildlife photography and you can't afford the Canons, and you're a little bit put off the actual tele zoom lenses, because we all know prime lenses are sharper than zooms, I don't think you would go too wrong with getting a lens like this. So I want to jump to the examples I've got to show you image comparisons. There's not a lot in it really. I really think anyone would be really impressed with this lens. It does become heavy after a while because it is 3 kilograms, and ironically it weighs the same. And I did some weighing. I did a weighing video, if you want to check that out, where I weighed in the 100-400 Mark II, the contemporary 150-600, and the Sport 150-600. The Sport weighs 3 kilograms, And this weighs the same. I found it really surprising that it weighed the same as an older lens. I eventually decided to sell the 150 to 600 Contemporary. I did want to keep the sport version of it, but I just felt it was a bit too heavy. And after using the Contemporary while I was blown away with image quality, I found Sigma's image stabilization, or optical stabilizer as Sigma call it, quite poor. You're more than free to see another YouTuber which I recommend you watch, called Angry Photographer. His name is Ken. He's done some videos on Sigma, and he doesn't really rate Sigma lenses that well because he has done some repair teardowns on them to see how they tick. What he has basically said is you'll find a Canon lens or a Nikon lens or a Tamron lens that's been around for a while, still working, but you'll be hard pressed to find a Sigma lens. There are a few exceptions to that. I think this lens certainly qualifies as an exception because this is quite an old lens now, but you can still pick them up functioning, working well. This particular lens I sent to Sigma to get a repair done on the contact block, because the contact block was a bit worn out, and I got the lens cleaned out. So that cost £250. Yes, it is a bit of an expense, and it is quite expensive for such a big lens. However, sometimes it can be worth it to make sure there's no fungus issues with a used lens. So let's get on to the examples, and hopefully this video was helpful. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video I just want to assess some images I've taken with the Prime 500mm DG-AX HSM 500mm f4.5 lens from Sigma. So we're going to assess some images here. Hopefully it'll be a little bit helpful. Some of you guys have requested that I do some, or take some pictures ranging from F4.5, which is the maximum the aperture can open up to F8, and give you a comparison between the two. So I've taken a picture here of one of those bears that you can get from Compare the Supermarket, and as you can see the nose is in focus, however the eyes are not. Now when you're talking about an aperture or 500mm at f4.5, the difference in terms of the focus is going to be very small. So to nail your focus, you're going to be need to be very precise with these extreme apertures. So as you can see, it's not quite in focus at f4.5. However, when we take a similar image to that, we'll be able to get the eyes in focus at f8. But let's just have a look at the image in more detail. As you can see, the bokeh effect is really good, and it does, when you're talking 500mm, it does blow out the background a lot more than you would expect, say a 70 to 200 or a 24 to 70. So extreme magnifications can sometimes give you bokeh that might seem it's come from a lens of like f1.2 or something like that. That's the effect of focal length on bokeh basically. So as you can see in this picture, we've got the nose bang on focus. Exposure is pretty good, image quality is really nice, I like it, and I don't see any problems with it. Just for you peeper watchers out there, we'll just zoom in significantly into this. We're at 50% there, 100%, it's quite sharp. Let's just have a look at the image info. Now we're running at 400th of a second, 1600 ISO on a 5D Mark II. All these pictures are taken on a 5D Mark II in RAW. Obviously you're going to see a bit of noise in there because it is 1600 ISO, but it's pretty good. Let's move to the next image. So basically it's the same image, but we've changed it to f8 this time. So let's zoom in and have a look at that in a little bit more detail. So we're at 100% here, same sort of image, except we've got the eyes more in focus. Again, when you're talking 500mm, the minuteness of trying to nail focus is very, very difficult, and it's very difficult at even f8, you know, as you can see there. But a prime lens is what you want when it comes to taking pictures, and I'd say it's pretty good. So let's have a look at another image. Now this is F4.5. I must admit it seems a little bit softer than it should. It could be a little bit sharper. You'll remember it's an old lens though, so it's not doing too bad. But let's zoom in and have a look at the quality. Let's go to 100%. There we go, 100%. You can see it's rendered the text pretty nicely. I don't see a lot of chromatic aberration in these images. There is a little bit, a slight tinge, but not much. You can correct that quite easily in Photoshop and Lightroom. And you know, it does give you good sharpness in the corners, if I'm honest. So let's have a look at the same image but in f8, because that's, you guys want to see the comparison, don't you, between 4.5 and f8 to see how sharper it is. So let's have a look at f8. Already it's giving me a slightly better exposure, and if we just get in there 100%, so you guys can see right in the corners, it is a lot sharper. I'd probably say it's twice as sharp being at f8 versus f4.5. The difference with the aperture though is when it's a dark day, you can open up that aperture and get an image that you couldn't normally get with a different type of lens that had a smaller aperture, like an f5.6 to f8, something like that. So you're going to get more sharpness when it comes to going to a small aperture with this lens, certainly. But having the option of changing that aperture back to f4.5 is something interesting happens, and the light starts to fade, gets dark, it's sunset, sunrise. You'll find that extra stop of light more helpful sometimes in certain instances. I also have another image here. Here we have a water fountain duck here, and so here you can see a water fountain duck picture that I've taken in my garden. Sharpness at f4.5 is pretty good here. Oh, it does fall off a little bit here, but you've got to remember minuteness of focus at f4.5. But if I'm going to be honest with you, sharpness is really good across the whole of the frame. Now remember, if you've used a crop sensor camera, right, such as long as it's a Canon one, you're going to get 800mm out of this lens rather than 500. Now, if you're using a Nikon lens, you'll get 750mm. A Canon is a 1.6 crop, gives you 800mm. Now, I will make a disclosure here. You can't really use teleconverters with this lens. I believe you can get hold of the Kenko teleconverter and it does work, albeit very slowly. However, the Canon and the Sigma ones don't work with it. So keep that in mind if you're thinking of using a teleconverter on this. Sure, you can use it in manual, not a problem. But autofocus won't function, unfortunately. So I just wanted to make that disclaimer. So I've got a picture here, obviously, of this duck, f4.5. But I wanted to compare it to a similar lens I used to own, which was the contemporary 150 to 600. When I compared image quality between the lenses at f8, I more or less felt that the quality was more or less the same. Obviously you've got more elements in the Sigma 150 to 600 to worry about, which means obviously it's not great when you've not got a lot of light to play with, or the sun setting or the sun rising, and you need that extra stop of light to get the image you need. So now this is obviously at 500mm, f4.5, and let's have a look at a comparable image, which is from the Sigma 150 to 600 contemporary at f6.3. Now obviously the aperture is a bit smaller, so your shutter speed will be a bit slower, but it also gets more in focus as well. Keep that in mind, because the aperture is smaller, you get more depth of field. So let's just go back. Let me show you what I mean. As you can see, it's quite in focus here, perfectly. But here, it's blurred the image out a little bit. Not by much, but a little bit. That's the effect of the bigger aperture. The bigger the aperture, the less depth of field you have to play with. So if something's a little bit further away from the main subject you're focusing on, it'll be slightly out of focus because of the small aperture, for the large aperture, sorry. So if you make your aperture smaller, lets less light in, your shutter speed will go slower, however it will make more things in focus. Now if we look at the difference between that and 6.3 on the 150 to 600 lens, that's set at 500mm as well. I know the image ain't quite the same, but I've tried to get it as close as I can. And if you have a look here, the duck here is perfectly in focus, but that's the difference of 6.3. But if you're looking at the image overall, in terms of quality, to me the image quality is there for both. It's more or less the same. I can't really say one is better than the other. So I just hope this little video gives you an idea of the quality you can achieve from this lens. It's, in my personal opinion, it's just as good as the 150 to 600 contemporary or sport lens that Sigma produce, and it's very close, if not equal, to the 100 to 400 Mark II Canon lens, even with extenders on. At some point I'll do a video on extenders on the 100 to 400 Mark II lens, but I just wanted to demonstrate the quality you can achieve with this lens, and I hope this video did give you an insight on quality, and thank you for watching. Hello everyone and welcome to an unpacking video. I'm just going to demonstrate what's in this package and show you the lens and everything that comes with it, and then hopefully this will be informative. So here we have a Sigma bag that contains a lens. Quite sturdy, quite strong, nice strap there, and it has a double zip that goes all the way around. So let's open the package. So here we've just opened it, and as you can see, the lid, if we just bring that down, you can see a lid there, has a slot there for the lens to recess into. We have a bit of foam here to protect the lens, and then we have the lens inside, and it's a nice sturdy bag to protect your lens, and it's always a good idea to keep hold of these because they are very valuable, especially if you want to transport your lens or sell it on. So let's just set the lens out. This is the lens. Let's just put that down and let's move this bag aside. So I just want to talk about the lens, go through the ins and outs of it, and hopefully this video will be informative. So here we have the Sigma lens. It has a nice grip on the tripod mount, which is quite sturdy. We have a nice cover, nice solid cover for the front of the lens element, protects it, that's what we want. So let's just take that off and put this lens down for a minute, as I do want to show you the lens hood. The lens hood is very sturdy, very strong. It's about 3 to 4 inches wide with a bit of rubber on the end that goes all the way around. It's got a velvet in between going around to help prevent lens flare. It's nice and solid, very sturdy, very strong, and that's something you need to protect your lens as well. If you're ever putting your lens down on the floor, you just put it down like that and that protects your lens. So it's a good thing to have. As we said, this is the lens cover, Velcro on there, nice and sturdy, very strong, and it will fit the entirety of your front element, which is quite large. So let's have a look at the lens in question. So look at the front element, it's quite big and it's very nice indeed. Looks nice, doesn't it, in that video? Looking at the construction of this beast, it's made out of metals. It's extremely strong. And if we look at the tripod mount, we've got 1/4 inch and your standard threads for your tripod mount. So it's very sturdy. It can be adjusted by twisting the knob there to untighten it, and that will adjust. Unfortunately, there's no clicking, so if you want to line it up, you have to line those lines up, because it doesn't include audible clicks to tell you when it's vertically level or horizontal. It's nice and sturdy, it's strong, and let's put on the lens hood to give it the proper look. So we just attach that on there like so. On there, just tighten that knob, and it's nice and secure, not going anywhere. So that's the Sigma lens. So the Sigma lens is called, if we just show you there, Sigma 500mm F4.5 APO EXDG hypersonic motor. So it's a very strong and sturdy lens to carry around, and it is very useful for wildlife and sports photography. So it has a focus window there, but the minimum focus is 4.5 meters. This weighs 3 kilograms. It's really heavy. So let's just get the weighing scale here. So if we put the lens on the weighing scale like so, it's reporting that it's about 3.5 kilograms. I'd say it's about 3,550 grams in weight. So you can clearly see it's quite a heavy lens. So let's just talk about the rest of this lens. It has a nice rubberized barrel for changing the focus, and in the focus window, if we just change that, the minimum focus is 4.5 meters. So it's quite a long way out that its minimum focus is. So it has some switches on here. Now we have a focus limiter switch on here that allows it to focus to the full, which is 4.5 meters to infinity, 8 meters to infinity, and 4 to 8 meters. And obviously we have a drop-in 46mm filter holder there that goes in there. We can put polarizers or ND filters in there, and there is a rotating barrel there to adjust, so we can actually move the polarizer filter while it's inside the lens body. Sorry. And then it has a autofocus and manual switch there. So essentially it's a really nice lens. So who is this lens for? Well, it's probably for people that need long focal lengths for doing photography at a distance, such as wildlife photography and sports. But what I would say about this lens is it's really good for long distance, and you'll be more than happy with the quality you can achieve with this lens. It's robust, it's hardy because it's made out of steel and metals all the way through. So dropping this will probably, although it would probably be no good to drop a lens like this, I would have thought it could survive a few knocks. Now you can use this lens on APS-C cameras, such as the 80D, 90D, 70D cameras, as well as full frame cameras like the 5D Mark III, 5D Mark IV, the new mirrorless cameras as well, with adapters of course. But what I would say about this lens is the corresponding focal increase is 1.6 times. So with this particular lens you're going to get 800 millimeters. What I have noticed is that F4.5 is a little bit soft, and incredibly soft on APS-C. So you will need to stop this lens down to F8. On full frame it's not so bad, and it's almost usable at F4.5 on full frame. However, with APS-C it's not usable, and you will need to stop this lens down. So for full frame I'd recommend stopping this down to F5.6 and getting this down to F8 on APS-C. So I hope this video was a little bit helpful, showing you the lens in more detail. It's a nice lens, it's hardy, it's good quality. You can pick these up from eBay for approximately £1,500. and for a good copy you should pay approximately that amount. I got this from America and I did get the elements cleaned. Just so that you know, unlike Canon, Sigma do support their lenses, even old ones. Now this came out in 2005 and I have had the rear contact blocks replaced. The rear contact blocks, if you don't know, are these. So hopefully you can see that in the video there. And I got the lens cleaned. And I got all the lens elements in this lens cleaned. All for the sum of £250. So what I just want you to take away from this video is that it's a high quality lens. Fantastic for doing sports and photography, but as with all lenses, it has some slight advantages and disadvantages. So one of the main disadvantages with this lens is it has no image stabilization, or as Sigma call it, optical stabilizer. Unlike the 150-600 contemporary, which I have reviewed, which does have it. Also the 150-600 sport, which does have it, which I have reviewed, and also the 60-600 new sport lens that came out, I think that was last year, that has image stabilization as well. As well as the Tamron 150-600 G1 and G2 lenses also have optical stabilizer. I think they call it VC. I think it's vibration compensation. Unfortunately this lens doesn't come with any sort of stabilization. So obviously, because for some people image stabilization is a must and must have. So I just wanted to make that point that this main disadvantage using this lens is no image stabilization. However, if you can live without no image stabilization, it's a prime lens. Other lens that I can think that might be better than this would be the new Sigma 500mm OS prime f4 lens. Obviously it's half a stop brighter, but it's also around £6,000. So obviously you can pick this up for a lot less money. So I just wanted to make that point. I hope you found this video helpful, interesting and informative about this lens, and I hope to see you in the next video. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy content that I do, and please give us the thumbs up. It helps the algorithm and helps people find my videos. Thank you for your time, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day. Okay, I just wanted to show you the Sigma Prime again. Just want to do the autofocus speed test. So it's on full. So you've seen the window, autofocus window, in terms of how quick it autofocuses. I just want to show you how quick it autofocuses in photography mode. So let's just have a look. So this is minimum focus to about 8 meters away. So let's just see how that does. Pretty quick. Try it again. Again, it's minimum, which is 4 meters. Try again. Fairly quick. Let's try infinity focus. That's infinity. That's infinity focus. Try again. And there you go. So it focuses really quickly on the EOS R. Don't see there being any problems with it. I just want to show you how quickly it autofocuses. It's a good lens, the Sigma Prime 500 DG HSM F4.5. You can pick these up for around the £1,500 mark on eBay. But you know, I just wanted to show you how quick it can autofocus on a full frame camera such as the EOS R, with its adapter that you can get for it for EF lenses. So again, thanks for watching. So everyone, I'm doing some tests on this Sigma 500mm DG-AX HSM prime lens. It's an older lens that came out in 2005. It has no image stabilization, but it is a sharp lens, particularly at f8. However, I do find at f4.5 on a crop sensor camera, it's a little bit on the soft side. Anyway, we're going to test it out with some test charts we have here, as you can see in the picture. And I'll just show it to you. We've got lots of test charts here that we're taking some pictures of. Ideally, we want to be checking the sharpness. So this should give you a good indication how sharp it can render the tests that we're running on this. So we're going to be looking at using aperture f4.5, 5.6, f8, f16 on a 32 megapixel 90D and a 30 megapixel full frame EOS R, a mirrorless camera. This is an EF lens, so obviously we have to use the EF adapter on the EOS R, and we're looking to see and look at the sharpness that can be achieved on the test charts. I'll give you a real world examples at some point in the future. I'll do that next. I may do that tomorrow, so you can get an idea on quality. I've already done a video of this lens versus the contemporary 150-600 Sigma lens, and I found pretty much at f8 the images are pretty good. Another side note that I haven't mentioned in previous videos. Now, you may not be aware that I have actually reviewed the Sigma 150-600 Contemporary Sport and the Tamron, the first edition that they did, called the G1 lens. I realised they've brought a new one out since then called that's the G2. But I need to make it absolutely clear that the Sigma 150-600 zooms, while they're fantastic lenses at f8 and above, I do find them to be quite soft at 6.3 aperture. So wide open, the Sigma zooms are not absolutely pin sharp. You need to be aware of that. I've looked at so many examples. I've obviously reviewed the lenses myself. I've looked at images, and the consensus I've come up with is that those tele-zooms that Sigma have come out with are not very sharp wide open. So ultimately, if you want wide open sharpness to be fantastic, you're going to need a prime lens. So this is the older prime lens that Sigma brought out in 2005. I am fully aware that they brought out an F4 optical stabilized version of this lens that's completely f4, not 4.5, so it's half a stop better. We're going to test this particular lens out though, the older lens, on these tests, and hopefully we'll get a good idea of how sharp they are. Now, in my real world testing of this lens outside at f8, even at f4.5, on full frame, to my eyes, it's good. It's when we put it on an APS-C camera does it sort of let it down a little bit, this lens. So it does seem the taxing of the smaller pixels that are on the sensor, on the APS-C sensor, is a big challenge for this lens. But on full frame, I think it's really good. So without further ado, let's look at the examples, the pictures. We'll look at them, we'll zoom into them 100%, and we'll see, you know, what we're getting out of this lens on full frame. So the camera I'm testing the full frame out of is the EOS R at 30 megapixels. I'm going to be using JPEG images for that, and the same for this, but this 90D can do 32 megapixels, so slightly more megapixels. It's not a big difference, to be honest with you. So let's check out the images and let's see which is the better. Personally, I'm probably thinking that on this older lens that came out in 2005, the lens weighs 3 kilograms. It does suffer with a little bit of chromatic aberration, I must be honest with you, but it's pretty good in terms of sharpness, and I've done lots of videos on this lens as well, so check those out. But personally, I think this is a good lens if you're wanting something you're on a budget. You can get hold of this lens for about £1,500 on eBay pretty much. I know they did a previous version to this which was just EX, didn't have the DG lettering in the actual name. That's pretty good as well, but this has a few extra SLD DG elements, coatings that make it slightly better than that older lens. So obviously this minimum focus on this particular lens is 4.5 meters, so it is a long way. I was approximately about 5 meters away from the test samples we've got here. So on the 90D, because of 1.6 crop, we're getting 800 millimeters. So in order to get a similar vantage point to the full frame, or on this 500mm lens, I've had to go back a little bit just to try and compensate and try and give you a similar framing of what we're taking a picture of, to give you a good comparison. So let's get over to the examples and check them out. So carrying on from the introduction video, we've got some samples here on the 500mm Sigma lens that came out in 2005. So what I want to do is look at some samples on these test charts we've looked at and taken a picture of, and we're going to look at the 4 different apertures. We're going to look at F4.5, which is wide open, F5.6, F8 and F16 respectively, and what we're looking for is sharpness. So we're using the EOS R full frame 30 megapixel mirrorless camera to test out the capabilities of its lens wide open. So what I want to do is I want to zoom in. We're going to have a look at various parts on the lens and see if we can determine if it's a good lens or not. So first thing to do is have a look at looking at the center of the image. So this particular image here is at f4.5. So this is the test chart we've got here. So let's zoom in right into the middle of the image. I like to go to about 50%, sometimes 100%. Looking at the image, it looks really sharp and really nice. Let's go into 100%. It's rendering the image really well, and it looks extremely sharp in the center. If I'm looking at these 2 dots here, if I was to pick up something negative, it doesn't quite look pin sharp, but remember we're looking at 100% here, at 500mm, so it's, you know, it's representing the test chart really well. So let's zoom out, get back to where we was at 25%. So what we like to look at is the corners now, to see how the corners are represented in the image. So let's just get down to the corner here, 100% there. It does appear to be less sharp in the corner here, but it still looks pretty good. Obviously make your own mind up if you think it's significantly sharp enough for you, if you are thinking about obtaining this lens yourself. So let's just come out of there, back to 33%, and let's have a look in the top corner, because what a lot of lenses tend to happen is they tend to be off center, and what you'll find is sometimes a certain corner will be sharper than the other. So let's just zoom into 100% here. Again, it looks very uniform to me. It's not quite as good as the center, but it still looks quite good there, looking at that. So let's just zoom out again. Let's go into this corner, top right corner. It does seem to be a manufacturing issue with a lot of lens manufacturers, that the top right corner and the bottom left right corner don't seem to be as good as the left. I don't know if that's the case with most lenses out there, but it does seem to be the case with a lot of lenses that you'll look at. So let's zoom back out, 33%, and let's zoom in this corner here. Pretty much looks uniform to me, 100%. The lens is doing a reasonably good job. So let's have a look how the image has improved at f5.6. Now looking at the center, it certainly looks a lot sharper to me. So let's go in there at 100% at f5.6. Just to let you know that all these images are taken using ISO 2500. I decided to use the same ISO on both cameras, so we can have a look and get a good idea. Looking at the center, it looks reasonably sharp to me. Looks comparable to 4.5. If we go back to 4.5 and let's just zoom back out. And then zoom back in here to 100%. Let's just compare it to f4.5 to 5.6. 5.6, 4.5. I certainly say in the center, I would say it looks a lot sharper at 5.6. So it seems to be representing quite a good, you know, in terms of quality, it looks pretty good to me. It's always a good idea to try and compare f4.5 to 5.6 in the corners. It does, to me, to my eye, look a bit softer at f4.5. But that's to be expected, obviously, with an older lens like this. Again, you've got to remember we're using a modern day camera on an older lens. So that's f5.6, sorry. Let's look at f8. So let's have a look in the center at 100%. It seems to have some improvement. Let's just compare it to the 5.6. Normally when you're stopping your lens down, it does tend to give you a better image, and yes, it certainly looks sharper to me. Let's go over here into the corner and compare it to the corner on at 5.6, and it certainly looks sharper to me at f8. And to be honest, using this lens as I have been doing and testing it out, I do think it's a lot sharper at f8 than it is at certainly at f4.5, because this is 4.5 here. Let's just go into the corner here and compare f8 to 4.5. So that's 4.5 there. 5.6, yes. Sorry, f8. I mean, definitely sharper. Typically, when you start using apertures higher than f8, you can introduce diffraction, which can have a tendency to soften your image. So just be aware of that. Using smaller apertures doesn't always necessarily mean better quality. So let's look at the last one, which is f16. Again, same ISO. The only difference is going to be shutter speed is going to be a lot slower, but I used a timer on a tripod, 10-second timer, so hopefully there should be no camera shake. Let's move this back to the center. So at f8 versus f16, it does seem to be an improvement in sharpness on there at f16. Back to the f8. F16, a slight improvement. I do want to check the corner here and compare that to the f8. It'll give us an idea on sharpness. So that's f8 there, and let's have a look at f16. It does seem pretty much the same to me. Let's just for the sake of it, go to 200% there and 200% there at f8 versus f16. It's hard to tell. They're pretty much similar to me. I don't think there's much of a difference there between f8 and f16. So there you are on that particular test. Looking at that, I think it's a good lens. You know, you're not going to be disappointed with the results. Let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. I do appreciate it, and like the video if it helps you out looking at the differences in these different apertures. The next thing we're going to look at is an APS-C lens. Sorry, an APS-C camera, the 90D. I want to compare it side by side, looking at these images, and compare it. So let's go and check out the 90D now. So we're gonna check out and compare the 90D images of the test chart, because I want to get an idea on how APS-C challenges this older lens that was made in 2005. Because the pixels are smaller, all APS-C cameras tend to be more challenging on full frame lenses than say full frame cameras are. So the camera we've just tested and looked at, the full frame, the EOS R, is a 30 megapixel camera. Now the 90D is a 32 megapixel camera, a few more pixels more, I know, in terms of megapixels, but in retrospect they are pretty comparable to each other. So we're going to be checking out apertures again. Obviously this one's f4.5. The next one will be 5.6, the one after that f8, and the one after that f16. We're going to check the center, we're going to check the corners. We'll see more or less if it's a good thing to use, because we're actually effectively the focal length is 800 millimeters. So obviously it's certainly 300 millimeters more than than using 500 millimeters on full frame, because that's the effect of putting an APS-C camera on any full frame lens. You have to times it by 1.6, and that gives you your true focal length. So in this particular instance, we've got a 800 millimeter prime lens on this 500, which is insane. You don't always have to use extenders, you know, to make your focal length longer. You can, in effect, use a different camera, like APS-C camera. Obviously, I'm fully aware that the EOS R and the R6 and the R5 don't have any APS-C cameras in their lineups at the moment, but that will change in the coming years. So at the moment, I'm using an adapter to adapt EF lenses onto the EOS R camera. Anyway, without further ado, let's have a look at the samples and let's get into this video. So what we want to be doing is obviously zooming into the center and having a look at how the image is resolved at f4.5. So let's zoom in there. We want to be going all the way to 100%, just to give us an idea of how sharp it is. Now, it doesn't seem very sharp, if I'm honest with you. It does feel like it's quite soft there. Looking around the image, into the corner, because I do like to have a look and see. We do see some fall off in the corners, but less so than you would have on full frame, because what you got to remember is the majority of the sensor, well, all of the sensor, is in the sharpest part of the lens, which is the center. But there is a bit of fall off there, as we can see, if we do zoom out a little bit, try and compare it to the center. Let's have a look in the top corner. 100%. It does feel quite soft. It does seem to be a regular occurrence, so that the right side of the lens does seem to be not as sharp as the left side. I don't know if that's a manufacturing defect of all lenses, but it does seem to be the case. Looking at that, it just feels very soft. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think on APS-C at F4.5 it's good or not great? Because it doesn't seem like it's that sharp. In general on APS-C, it does feel better on full frame than it does on a crop sensor camera like the 90D. Anyway, let's have a look at F5.6. ISO is 2500, and the only difference is like the shutter speed. So let's go into 100%. I do like to compare it to the different apertures, just to give you a quick representation. To be honest, I don't think there's much difference. It still feels quite soft. 5.6. Let's have a look at corners. Near this 8 tends to be giving me a rough idea of how it's doing in the corners. Does it look any better at f5.6 than it does at f4.5? Not really, no. It might even be a tiny bit worse, if I'm honest. Let's move on to f8. f8 tends to be the sweet spot aperture on most lenses. Does seem to be a bit better, 100%. Compare it at f4.5 at f8, 4.5. Slight improvement. Let's have a look at down where the number 8 was in this corner. Doesn't seem to be that much of an improvement. A little bit. You know, make your own mind up in the comments. Let me know what you think. Do you think it's not fantastic? Let's have a look in the bottom corner, see if that improves anything. F8, 4.5, F8. There's a slight improvement. Let's have a look at F16. Personally, looking at the F16 image, it doesn't look too bad. If I'm honest with you, I probably wouldn't want to crop images using this lens, but you shouldn't have a need to with it being 800mm. Let's have a look in the centre. 100% versus f4.5. That should give us a better idea. f16, f4.5, f16. This is f8, f8, f16, f8, f16. I have to be honest with you, looking at these images, I would certainly say the full frame images certainly look better to me. Let me know in the comments what you think. I think if you're not going to crop in and just use APS-C camera on this particular lens, it should be fine. The imagery should be pretty good. But I think when you start cropping in, that's where you're going to get into problems here, where you realise this lens is not particularly that sharp compared to having it on a full frame. But I tell you what, let's have a look at two images on full frame versus APS-C, and it'll give us more of a comparison, and then you'll see a difference. So okay, that's that. So we're going to compare images from the EOS R, which is full frame, versus APS-C on the 90D. So we're just going to have a look at the images, and hopefully it'll give us a good idea on which is better on this particular older lens. Obviously we already know APS-C is challenging on any full frame lens when you compare it to a full frame camera. So we've got the EOS R here at 30 megapixels, full frame camera, adapted obviously because it's in the F lens, and obviously it's natively on the 90D as well. So you know, I didn't really tell any difference in focusing, it was pretty much the same. So that's a testament to the adapter, the EF adapter that you can put on the EOS R. Anyway, let's have a look at the results that we've got here. So we've got 2 images at f4.5 and 2 images at f8. Generally f8 tends to be the sweet spot of most lenses. And in most cases you have to stop the lens down to give yourself the best results, unless you do have one of the expensive Canon white primes. But generally speaking, if you're buying any sort of other type of lens off brand make, you will have to stop it down at least by 1 stop. So the EOS are here at f4.5. Let's zoom in there to 100%, like I'd like to do most of the time. It gives an idea on sharpness, and it looks pretty good. I like it. You know, I'd say that's a really good representation of the image. Let's have a look on the 90D. So this is APS-C at f4.5. So let's go into 100%. It doesn't look very good. It looks quite soft, if I'm honest with you. So it may be that APS-C on this particular camera is challenging. So what that means is I would not recommend, if a lens is quite poor on APS-C body, try and avoid cropping in whenever possible, because you've not got the detail to work with. However, if you're on full frame, you certainly will have a better prospect of cropping your images, especially when it comes to wildlife or sports photography. So let's have a look at the 100% in the center on the f4.5 aperture on the EOS R full. So this is full frame. Looks really nice, if I'm honest with you. Looking on APS-C, it looks terrible. Let's have a look in the corners. Let's just go to the EOS R. Look in the corners at 100%. It's just fall off a little bit here, if I'm honest. Looking at there, it's falling off a bit. The APS-C should do a bit better, but because it's already terrible cropping in, I don't really hold much hope for it. So there you can clearly see that the quality is a lot better on the full frame than it is on the APS-C. It just looks blown out and grainy, and obviously the full frame deals with the ISO of 2500 a lot better than it does on an APS-C crop sensor camera, because it's a smaller sensor. You've got to remember that it's much smaller. So going back to full frame, it just looks a lot better, even with the exposure a little bit darker. It's still a lot better. Let's go to the top part here. Let's go back to the 90D top part. Doesn't look good, does it? Not look good at all. That's 200%, gone too much. Yeah, it's not good, is it? Alright, let's have a look at f8 on the EOS R, which means it should literally blow away APS-C. So let's have a look in the centre. It's 100%. Looks pretty good. APS-C does seem to have improved significantly at f8, but it's still not up to the same quality that we're getting out of the full frame. So, like I've already said, I would probably say to you, don't crop with the APS-C camera on, but you can crop with the full frame EOS R. Let's go into the corner here. I like to check out these bottom corners here and compare it to the APS-C. So it does look quite, it's not great. It's not great in the corners, if I'm honest, on the APS-C. Back to the full frame. Looks pretty good to me. Full frame looks fantastic actually. It looks really good, even for an older lens. Go back to the APS-C, which is the 90D. 90D, it just doesn't look good in the corners. It really doesn't. Let's have a look in the far corner here, or F8. Back to the ESR. ESR looks reasonable. What you find is on full frame in the corners, your image suffers because the lens isn't designed to be fantastic in the corners. It's sharpest in the center of the lens. So obviously if you're going to crop and your image is in the center, cropping is not a problem. On APS-C I would not recommend it. Let's just go back to the center. That's the center on APS-C 90D at 32 megapixels, and on the full frame that we have here it's 30 megapixels. So there's a slight difference with pixels, but 2 megapixels isn't going to make much of a big deal. APS-C versus full frame. I think full frame with this 500 prime wins out. So I would recommend, when you're using an older lens and it's designed for full frame, try and avoid using APS-C on it. At a pinch, obviously you can use the APS-C to extend your focal length and use it as an extender in effect. But I would highly recommend you try putting an extender on while you're using an APS-C camera like the 90D, 80D, 70D, because you're not going to be too happy with the results. So full frame, this lens is reasonably good. APS-C, not so great. Make your mind up in the comments. Tell me what you think about this lens and the quality. You know, I'll churn out another video about some real world examples. Hopefully that will give you an idea on differences in the real world, because obviously the real world doesn't always translate in terms of doing test shots and test charts like we're doing here. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Let me know what you thought about this video in the comments. Do you think any sort of improvement is needed to present these results to you? But thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day. So here we have my Sigma Prime lens that I'm just testing out for the time being, as we'll probably end up exchanging it for a different lens at some point. But I just want to illustrate something on this lens, which is at the moment I'm testing out. At the moment we're testing out the focus capability of this lens in terms of extreme apertures and depth of field. So in this video I'm going to illustrate depth of field. So I just want to show you guys the differences between apertures of F4.5 to F16, as well as the minuteness of using an extreme telephoto lens like this on the subject field that we have over here. So let's have a look. What we have over here is we have a light box, we have an Android figurine, a Deredex starship from Star Trek, and an Everbuild PVA bond glue bottle. So we're going to have a look at how our depth of field relates, and you'll get to see the differences between F4.5, F5.6, F8 and F16 in some images I've got that I'll show you shortly. But in this video I just want to illustrate depth of field so you can have a look for yourself. How does it affect subjects? So let's have a look. So in this video I want to demonstrate depth of field. Now we can exaggerate depth of field using an extreme telephoto lens. So this is a wildlife stroke sports photography lens. It's a prime 500mm Sigma 500mm f4.5 APO EXDG HSM lens. These lenses are typically used for taking imagery of wildlife and sports from long distances. It has the effect of blowing out your background extreme to an extreme point. So I wanted to demonstrate how moving the focus ring on this lens by a very slight amount, unlike other lenses you may have experienced, such as say a 70 to 200, a 50mm, you won't get this sort of extreme depth of field because of the the compression of the telephoto lens. So I'm just going to demonstrate how changing the focal range, the focus ring, slightly affects your depth of field. So looking at the actual 3 models we've set up here, they're about 10 centimeters apart. So if we just move the focus ring, I just want to demonstrate this so you can see in the actual video. So the Starship is in focus. As you can see, the character in front of it has gone blurry. That's because the focus range has moved. And the thing with telephoto lenses is the focal range is so small. You know, you can get literally an eye in focus and get feathers out of focus on the same subject, because the focal range is so tiny, so minute. You have to be spot on with your focus. So let's keep going. And there we've got the Starship out of focus now, and now the bottle, the Everbuild PVA Bond Glue bottle, is in focus. So if we come back a tiny bit, just a millimeter or so, we're bringing the Starship into focus, and then a bit more, and then that's gone out of focus, and you can clearly see how the bottle has gone completely out of focus, and obviously you can see the Android character is in focus. So this is the difference between depth of field, how racking the focus on your lens, your prime lens, your zoom lens, whatever lens you've got, can achieve different results. And I hope this was useful to you. So in this video I want to demonstrate bokeh. So what is bokeh? Generally it means highlights in the background, how lights appear, and the easiest way of doing this is using Christmas lights behind a bottle that we've set up. So what we're looking for is those lights, that bokeh, we want to appear to be round circles. We don't want misshaped onion rings, anything like that. So we're trying to get a good visual representation of what the lights look like out of focus, so it looks reasonably good. So I'm going to demonstrate in this bottle here so you can have a look for yourself. So let's just bring that bottle into focus. Obviously you can see we've got 2 Christmas lights in the background on a Christmas tree. So let's just rack our focus a little bit so that we've got the bottle in focus. There we go, we've got it in focus there. Now what I can tell you is the round light circles are beginning to take on the shape of a misshapen onion ring to the edges. However, in the centre of the actual picture, near the bottle, we can see we've got a uniformed circle, which is pleasing to the eye. So, you know, obviously at the edges of the frame on this particular Sigma lens, it's not fantastic, but you probably wouldn't notice it. But closer in to the centre, we can see, while it is tending to be a bit more of an onion ring look, it's still reasonably good and pleasing, as you can see in this imagery. And I can tell you on the bottle, it's quite sharp and very pleasing to the eye. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the images we've got. So at F4.5, you can see it's blowing out the background quite a lot. Let's have a look at the next image at F5.6. It's not as much blown out as the F4.5, but it still blows out the background significantly. Let's move to F8. F8 is typically pretty good for getting a lot in focus in general. However, when using an extreme telephoto lens like this, even F8 doesn't get a lot in focus. So let's move on to F16. Looking at F16, we've got quite a bit in focus here. You can still see the bottles out of focus quite a lot. So obviously we will need to go even further in terms of depth of field for a better image. So let's have a look at F32. So in F32 you can clearly see that more is in focus, but what tends to happen is when we use bigger or smaller depth of fields, going up the numbers from F16, F22, F32, we start to introduce diffraction. What is diffraction? Well, it tends to be artifacts in the image that gives us a softer image, and typically speaking I'm trying to avoid going above F16 whenever possible. Anyway, I hope this video helps you out and it was interesting to look at, and thanks for watching. Hello everyone, welcome to a new video about the Sigma 500mm lens. We're going to be looking at a colour test chart this time. I just want to give you a quick look-see. It's up to you to make your mind up. I'm not going to make any sort of judgment and force that judgment on you guys, because it's up to you to make your own mind up. But first of all, let's just get hold of the lens so you can see it in the webcam. So, this is the 500mm Sigma prime lens, right? Came out in 2005. It's an apertured F4.5 APO EXDG hypersonic motored lens, or HSM for short. It has a limiter on there which is full, 8 meters to infinity and 4 to 8 meters. So you've got 3 modes of the focus limiter there. You've got a autofocus and manual focus switch, you can turn it on and off. You have a 46mm drop-in filter holder there, so you can put in polarizers and ND filters if you need to. The tripod mount is adjustable, so it can move and rotate, but it has no clicking, so it doesn't tell you specifically when you're vertical or horizontal, when you're level. So there's a bit of a downside. Newer lenses have a click on there to tell you, an audible click to tell you when you're actually in the right position. The tripod mount I like. It's got grooves, it's contoured, as you can see. Hopefully you can see that in the video. And lots of various holes for attaching to the tripod. The hood, the lens hood, sorry, is nice and sturdy, has rubber around it, and it's nice and made out of metals, and it's heavy. It's 3 kilogram. With a camera it's about 3.5 kilogram. Forgive me for holding it for much longer because it's getting heavy on my arms. The only negative thing I'd say about the lens hood collar is I would have liked it to be a bit longer. It's only probably about 3 inches long, so it's not that long, which is the downside about that. I would prefer it to be a lot longer. Anyway, let's put this down because it's getting heavy. So what I want to do in this video is just show you how it reproduces colour. So we've got 4 apertures, as we have had in the previous video regarding the sharpness test. Check that video out please if you want to check the sharpness of this lens out. So we've got F4.5, 5.6, F8, F16, and we're going to be checking the results on the 90D as well. This is the EOS R mirrorless camera full frame. It renders images at 30 megapixels, and we're using JPEG images at the moment. I'm not using RAW because I need to update my software to be able to use the new RAW files. But for the time being, we're going to check out the image quality here. and look at the colours. So really, I just want you to have a good look and make your own mind up whether you think the colours are good. So F4.5, I just want to really show you the colour swatches really, in terms of the quality. So personally, looking at it at F4.5, it does seem a bit dull, less sharp. We can zoom into the fruit here. You know, obviously, basically it's a printout test charts that we've got here, and I'll probably show you the lens sharpness test card next time. I'll do that tomorrow, I think. But at the moment, I just want to show the colours. So that's F4.5. Make your mind up if you like that or not. But for me, it's not as crisp as it could be. So let's look at F5.6. Already, I don't know if it's me, but the settings were the same at ISO 2500, and the shutter speed ranged from 80th of a second with the 10-second timer. So I avoided camera shake, so there should be no camera shake. But looking at the results, it looks pretty good at F5.6. Not impressed with F4.5, but 5.6 looks okay. I just want to, give you a bit of a closer look. It's up to you to make your mind up whether you think it's a nice reflection of colours, because colours can be subjective. Some people like it more redder, some people like it colder. I know the Sony cameras, for example, that are colder. Canon are known for being more warmer with their colours. But obviously we're talking about using a Sigma lens, so it's likely it will have a slight bearing on the colours. So obviously that's F5.6. If you want to have a look at the colours, please go back and just freeze the video and look at it to compare. So like I said, it's the EOS R with the adapter on there. So F8, again, it's pretty much subjective. The colours look vibrant to me and look quite nice. We just zoom in there a little bit for you to have a look at the colours of the fruits here. It's up to you, make your mind up. But it looks pleasing to the eye. Don't see any issues there with the reproduction of the colours. So let's just have a look at F16. Again, very similar. Looks nice in terms of how it's reproducing the colours. We can just come down here to the colour swatch there and have a look. And freeze the video if you want to check the examples yourself and just look at the colours. So let's just zoom into the fruit there. Let's have a look. Again, I don't see much difference there versus 5.6, F8, F16. Looks all fine, all good to me. So make your own mind up. So let's get on to checking the 90D. Let's see the results from that camera, and then we'll try and do a side-by-side comparison. Okay, here we have the 90D samples of the colour chart. I thought I'd just show you the lens again. So again, it's a Sigma 500mm f4.5 APO DG HSM Super Telephoto lens. It's nice and sharp. It has a massive front element. It is heavy, and it does have an adjustable tripod collar as well as a lens hood, which is secured by a nice tightening nut there. And it's heavy at probably 3 kilograms for the actual lens itself. And then if you stick a camera on, I suspect if you sticked something like a 1DX body on there, you're probably talking 4 kilograms to carry around, and it's a hefty weight. So let's just get to the video. I want to check out, the results from the 90D. As I've said, I wasn't greatly impressed with the lens sharpness test that I did. I did a video yesterday. Please check it out if you haven't seen it already. So looking at the F4.5, I'm looking at the text and to be honest with you, it doesn't look very promising at f4.5. Just look at that. And I'm going to go into this lens stroke camera text here. I appreciate the ISO is 2500, so it's not going to be as clean as, say, the EOS R full frame camera, because the 90D is a crop sensor camera. It's APS-C. You times your focal length by 1.6. Effective focal length on this is 800mm, not 500mm. So it's magnifying the centre of the lens, the sharpest part of the lens, but it's not doing a great job at f4.5, if I'm honest with you. And to be honest, I think the colours are quite dull at f4.5 as well. But it just looks too soft at f4.5 on the APS-C. I just don't like it at all. But this isn't about sharpness, this video, it's about colour. So let's just have a quick look at the colour. I'm not going to talk about it in too much depth because it's up to you to make your own mind up. Have a look, see if you like it or not. When I look at the board here, it just doesn't seem vibrant. It just doesn't seem bright enough. Now, I don't believe it's something to do with the exposure. I just don't think it reproduces the colours properly at f4.5. So let's have a look at f5.6 after I've zoomed in a little bit. I do like to zoom in into the bananas so you can have a bit of a look at the banana and make your own mind up. If you think the quality is there, it's up to you to make your mind up, I think. Let's have a look at 5.6. Looking at the test chart at 5.6, it seems better, and even looking at the lens camera text here, it's slightly better, but not by much. You know, colour wise, it's a bit better, to be honest with you. But again, it's up to you to make your mind up. So let's have a look at F8. Looking at the text, it seems better. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to 5.6 and go in there. Maybe this would be a better test. Let's go up to 100%. I'm not going to focus too much on sharpness, but I do want you to see this. This should give you an idea. Right, so f4.5, we're going to focus on the lens stroke camera text that's in bold here. So looking at that at 100%, it doesn't look very great. Now, I appreciate there's a lot of grey in there because ISO 2500. But let's have a look at 5.6. Looks slightly better. And then F8. Slightly better again, but it doesn't quite look sharp enough to me. But again, let's go back to the banana so you can have a close look at F8. Up to you, make your mind up whether you think do you like the colours. So let's go to F16, have a look at that. F16, I must admit that at 2500 ISO it isn't giving a great result, in my opinion. I just think it's a bit not quite there, you know. Colour wise, it seems reasonable. You know, Canon does tend to err on the reds more than the blues. As I've said before, you know, Sony colours look very cold, Canon colours look very warm. But let's just zoom into the banana so you guys can have another look at the fruit. Make your own mind up there. So it's up to you. Make your mind up on the 90D results. At 32 megapixels, these are JPEG images. So let's jump to a side-by-side comparison. So we can have a look at the EOS R full frame versus the 90D. I think this will be a good comparison to see the differences between ISO 2500 on full frame and ISO 2500 on APS-C crop sensor. So let's jump to that and have a look at that. So we're going to do side-by-side comparison here. We've got the EOS R at f4.5 ISO 2500 We've got the 90D at F4.5 as well. So let's first just crack on with the example we've got here. So now I do want to compare sharpness of full frame just briefly. You check the sharpness test I'd done the other day, please. But this may be a fair comparison. As I've said previously in that video, where I've said that the full frame seems to work better than the APS-C, because I think the APS-C is more challenging on this particular lens. I don't think the optics are super sharp, and I don't think it was designed in mind to have APS-C cameras on. So, but first things first is looking at the full frame. This is the EOS R image. Again, I don't think it's reproducing a good result of the colours. I just think something's off at F4.5. It doesn't seem crisp, doesn't seem vibrant to me. Canon colours should be vibrant. Looking at that, I just don't like it. So let's have a look at the 90D at the same aperture, F4.5. It's pretty much the same colour wise. It just looks, I don't know how to say it really. It looks, you know, unsharp. It just doesn't look sharp. When you look at even the text doesn't look great. But I just want to give you a close-up of the colours really, so you can make your own mind up. So let's just zoom in. So that's the EOS R full frame. That's your colours. And then we just go back to the 90D here, and that's your colours there and how it represents. Up to you, make your mind up regarding colours. This is about colours, not really sharpness, but I will address the sharpness a little bit in this video as well. So let's just move on to F8 on the EOS R. Now looking at the EOS R, it's reproducing the colours vibrantly. I really like it. I'm just going to get the test chart out here and have a quick look and try and compare it. I think it's doing a good job at F8 reproducing the colours to the test chart. I like it. So let's just zoom in and have a look at the test, the colours here regarding this fruit. It looks pretty good at F8, and this is the EOS R, and sharpness seems pretty good as well, but I'm going to come back to the sharpness in a minute. I just want to look at colours. Please feel free to freeze the video at any point and have a close look at the colours. You can, if you're watching this on YouTube in a small screen, you know, mode, you can always click the small box at the bottom that will enlarge the screen at HD quality, and you'll be able to see colours and sharpness in better detail. Just remember that. Anyway, let's just have a look at the 90D, see how that's reproducing at F8. Colour wise, it looks like it's reproducing the colours fairly, but I don't know, sharpness doesn't seem there. The crispness of Canon colours ain't coming to me here, and I just think that APS-C is very challenging on this particular camera, and this camera lens. Sorry, I would recommend that you don't think about cropping on this particular lens. I just think the sharpness isn't quite there. But let's address sharpness, and we'll come back to that. Well, anyway, at F8, let's just zoom into the APS-C. So that's APS-C. That's full frame at F8. So you make your mind up. Which do you prefer? I prefer the full frame, if I'm honest with you. So there is some truth out there in regards to that full frame is better for giving you better results. And if you're doing portraiture photography, I think I would advise you to go towards a full frame camera rather than an APS-C camera. But if you're going for sport and fast action and you need the capability of APS-C, the 1.6 crop, to magnify your lens, it can get you closer. But just remember that it also magnifies the imperfections in your lens as well. Anyway, let's have a look at the sharpness here, because I said I addressed that, didn't I? So F4.5, I want to zoom into the text of this lens camera here. And we're going to go all the way up to 200% because I want you to see this. So this is full frame EOS R, 30 megapixel camera. And let's have a look at the same thing with the 90D, because I want to highlight the quality, and I want to show you the difference between full frame and APS-C. And this will be a general thing. You'll get a good indication from this why people want full frame over APS-C. Don't get me wrong, I like using APS-C. I've never had a problem with using APS-C. I just feel that it's too challenging for this lens. And don't forget, it is a 2005 lens. We're talking 15 years old lens. More modern lenses are geared towards better quality and are capable of giving you better results. So full frame looks reasonable good, reasonably sharp. Even f4.5 isn't fantastic, obviously, as an aperture. You always need to stop it down. Doesn't look too great on sharpness there, but it's not too bad on full frame. We try and do that on the APS-C. My god, it looks terrible, and I don't think it's handling the light very well as well. So let's have a look at f8, because that'll give us a better idea on the quality that the camera can produce. So it's got a 200%. I don't tend to like to go too much into pixel peeping like we're doing here, but this will give you, I suppose, a better representation on sharpness. Right, look at the 90D. Let's go and zoom in there. 200%. I know it's extreme, but it's giving us a fair result. And just so you know, I try to position both cameras at different places to give you a similar perspective, because one is 800mm, one is 500mm. So just keep that in mind. But okay, EOS R at f8 looks reasonable. It's not pin sharp, but it's reasonable. We look at APS-C, and you can see a lot of noise in there as well at 2500 ISO. It doesn't look sharp at all. Even at f8 it's not great. So it's up to you to make your mind up whether you think this lens is good on APS-C. I just wanted to give you a representation on colours, so you get an idea of what the lens can produce in colours. So let's just zoom back out before we end this. Just want to give you an idea of colours. So that's the EOS R, and this is the 90D at f8. So EOS R seems to represent the colours fairly and accurately and looks not bad. The 90D just feels grainy at 2500 ISO. Might be a good idea to test them at a lower ISO rating and see, but I think it gives you a rough idea of the quality of the lens. I just don't think this lens is great on APS-C. It's not bad on full frame, obviously. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think this is a good lens to have, or is it too old and literally can't cope with the modern day cameras? Thanks for watching. Hope you have a nice day. I will do another one on lens sharpness tomorrow, but hope to see you in another video. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. So in this video I'm just going to briefly talk about the Sigma 500 prime Sigma F4.5 APO EXDG HSM lens. It's a prime lens. It's great for doing wildlife photography. It has an aperture of f4.5, has no image stabilization. It has a solid lens hood which is made out of metal with rubber at the end. It has a tripod collar for moving vertical and horizontal axis. Has no clicking, so obviously you have to visually make sure the lines are lined up like so. Hopefully you can see that in the video. We have a focus limiter, full 8 meters to infinity and 4 to 8 meters. We have a drop-in filter holder, which is a 46mm size, manual focus and autofocus in the actual selector there for focusing, and it's about 3 kilograms in weight, and it's a heavy lens. We're looking at the results on an EOS R, mirrorless camera with an adapter on, so it's an EF lens for Canon. So I just want to look at the results, and it's up to you to peruse the results and decide whether you would like to invest in this lens, which you can pick up for about £1,500 on eBay, or you may wish to invest in the more expensive F4 version that's come out. I think it was last year it were released, and that's something in the region of £6,000. So it depends obviously what you prefer. This is a cheaper alternative, and if you're happy without image stabilization, fantastic lens for you. But what you may find is APS-C is very challenging on this lens, and you may not like the results. ISO for all images are taken at 2500. Shutter speeds are ranging between 80 to 5. Basically, I put it on a tripod, and then we just set the timer, 10-second timer on this camera and the other camera, just to give us some sharp results with no camera shake. So let's get to the results. So here we have the lens sharpness test card. We're just going to look into the actual card pictures that are JPEG images. We're just going to zoom in 100%, and then you get an idea of what it's doing. But this is a F4.5. Let's zoom in to 100%, which gives us good results in the center, but I do not think it gives good results in the corners, because if we look here at 100%, we have some softening going on, where the lens sharpness text is, as well as where this number 1 is. There is some texture in this box that you cannot see in this particular image, but when we change apertures you can. So obviously what's happening is, I do think we are getting some softness at f4.5 in this particular image. If we look at f5.6, I do also think there's some vignetting going off. I'm going to do a separate video showing you the vignetting, so don't worry about that. But in this, I'm just going to zoom into the actual middle of the lens at 100%, just to show you roughly the quality, which isn't too bad there. Zoom out, and let's have a look and see if it's giving us any better results in the corner. If we've got 100% at f5.6, while we're seeing a little bit of the texture in this box and some softening around the text here, I can't make out the texture. So even at 5.6, we're not having a major improvement there. But in the center, I think it's giving us some good results. If we can just have a closer look of the text here at 100%, you know, and let's go back. 100% text here in the corner, and at f5.6 you can see it's a bit clearer. So let's have a look at f8. So let's zoom in to f8, 100% in the center, 100%. Seems to be a slight improvement, but I think where the main improvement we're getting is in this corner here. I can see in this particular part here where the box is, I can see more detail in the pattern that is there, and obviously the lens text here is clearer as well, even with the tiny bit of the box there. If we go in, you can see there's some pattern there. So at f8, obviously the quality is better. So obviously stopping this lens down to f8 does make your image better. Let's have a look at f16. F16 should be even sharper still, but we'll find out if we're getting any diffraction going off, because diffraction can soften your image a little bit. So let's go to 100% here. Do like to compare it to the f8, so let's zoom in into the f8 image, f16, f8. They're about the same. I don't think there's much diffraction going off at f16. I suspect if we tried using apertures of f32 or f22, we will probably get a bit of diffraction coming in there. But I do think it's giving us some good results on full frame. So let's jump to the APS-C camera we've got, the 90D, and we'll check out the results there. But there is a bit of vignetting going off at F4.5. I'll do a separate video for that. Anyway, let's jump to that, and I'll see you soon. Hello everyone, this is the 90D test of the lens sharpness test card. So we're just going to jump into the image and have a look and see the quality that we're getting from APS-C. Obviously APS-C is more challenging on the Sigma lens. We're running at 2500 ISO, just like the EOS R we've just looked at, and I will compare them side by side as well. So let's just have a look at this image here. At f4.5 I want to go to 100%, and first thing I can say is we're seeing quite a bit of softness, first of all. Secondly, the ISO of 2500 is showing up here quite a bit, so just keep that in mind, that there is a bit of ISO noise that's going off here. But I do like to check out the corners. Looking in the corners, it's softness there, quite obvious, and there's no pattern in the box around the number 1 here, so clearly there's a lot of softness going off there. So I would say don't crop in basically on this lens if you're using APS-C. Looking at 100% in this corner, again it looks really terrible if I'm honest with you, in the corner. And if we have a look in this side, it's the same story at 100%. Come down to the bottom, and it's not very sharp here either. So let's have a look at f5.6, see if we've got any improvement. Not a lot, to be honest with you. We just look into that at 100%. It really looks terrible if I'm honest with you, even in the centre. I'm not happy with it, you know, cropping in at all. So I would certainly recommend that you don't consider cropping in on an APS-C body. Don't forget the effective focal length is 800mm, the 1.6 crop. So I had to move the lens probably about 1.5 meters back to get the sort of same framing that I was getting on the EOS R, because obviously it's more telephoto. Again here we're looking to see if we can see any sort of pattern in that box. There's nothing there, so that suggests that it's not giving us a good result on APS-C, and even the number 1 looks quite soft looking around that. So let's have a look at f8. Have a look at f8 in the centre again. Again, it still looks a bit soft, almost like it's out of focus if it, you know, but it's in focus, I can tell you that. Let's come down to the bottom here and let's see if we can see any of that pattern in that box. even at f8, I can see a little bit of the pattern, but not much. I'll zoom in to 200% so you can see it. Now there is a pattern there, but it's not clear. And it was clearer than that on the EOS R. So let's have a look at f16, see if we got any better results there. So let's have a look at f16, where we're not getting diffraction going off at the moment. At 100%, that is, it looks a little bit better, but I do want to come down to the corner and have a look at that pattern and see if we can see it any better. That's interesting. We are getting diffraction after all, because I can't see any of that pattern where you can see a little bit of it there in the f8 image. So what we can see is diffraction does play an important role on APS-C. That's surprising. I didn't actually know that. So you learn something new every day. So yeah, there's no pattern that you can see there. So my conclusion is on APS-C it's not great, and it's to be honest, it's a full frame lens. It should be used on a full frame body. You know, I would probably say don't crop if you're going to use APS-C on this lens. But that's surprising. So what we found out that at f8 we're not getting the sharpness. Even, you see, the thing with APS-C is it's not using the entirety of the lens. It's using the sharpest part of the lens. And even using the sharpest part of the lens, we're still getting softness in the corners, which is surprising. You would expect that on full frame, but you wouldn't expect that on APS-C, so that's interesting to learn. So, upshot of it is try not crop whenever possible using a lens like this, because I don't think the sharpness is there for APS-C. Okay, let's have a look and compare side by side and have a look at the actual EOS R images versus the 90D. So hello, we're going to test and have a look at the lens sharpness test card, but we're going to have a look side by side the EOS R and the 90D. I want to find out if APS-C is a lot worse than the full frame pictures that we've got here. So let's have a look at the centre of the EOS R at f4.5. Let's see if we're getting some sharpness there. It does look a little bit soft, if I'm honest with you. If we go down to the bottom here, the lens sharpness text looks a bit soft, and so does this box here. I don't see any pattern, and there is a pattern there. So let's look at the 90D, see how that's doing. Again, you'll see more noise or grain in the ISO of 2500. Both cameras are set up to 2500 ISO. So what we're looking for is to see if we're getting some sharpness. And to be honest with you, it just looks terrible at f4.5 on APS-C. I think APS-C is too much for this lens. But I would recommend you do not crop in if you do intend to using an APS-C camera on this particular lens. Looking at the lens sharpness area here and the number 1 there and the box around it, it is extremely soft. It's terrible. If we zoom in, while you can see a little bit of the pattern, it's almost unusable. So I would say do not crop with this lens, because I do not think it will be a good lens to crop with if you're using APS-C. We're using the 90D at 32 megapixels versus the EOS R, which has 30 megapixels, but it is full frame obviously. We're using the EF adapter on there on the EOS R mirrorless camera. So let's have a look at f8 on the EOS R, giving us good results. I do think it's a lot sharper, obviously at 100%. If we go back here, This is the EOS R at F4.5, and this is the F8. So it looks better and looks cleaner. And now if we go down to the bottom here, just look how much detail we're getting out of that box there now. And I'll zoom into 200%, where we were getting nothing at F4.5. So it's more defined, it's clearer, it's crisper, it looks nicer. So I don't think at F8, using this on full frame, it becomes a very sharp lens at F8. You can go to the text a little bit in the corner, just have a look, where it seems a bit soft here. Here it just looks more defined. While there is some softness in the corners, it's not too terrible. So let's have a look at the 90D at F8, see if we're getting anything better. So we're going to have a look at 100%. 100%, it looks really soft in the centre. It looks not too fantastic, if I'm honest with you. Let's go down into the corner where we've been looking at that box. While there is a pattern there, it's still not very clear, even at F8. So let's go back to the EOS R and let's go down to that bottom corner where we're keeping a comparison. So let's zoom in to 200%. So at 200% we can clearly see the pattern there. It's very clear, it's quite crisp. Now if we go to the 90D, F8, same sort of settings, 2500 ISO on both cameras, you can clearly see we have an issue there. So I just wanted to give you a good comparison of APS-C versus full frame on this camera, and looking at the lens sharpness test here, in my eye, APS-C is too much of a challenge for this lens. I think if you're going to use APS-C, you don't want to be cropping, because you'll just bring more of the softness into your image and it won't be a great real world result. Now I will give you a real world examples video tomorrow so you can see the sharpness in real things, real models that I've set up, you know, just so you get a comparison of what it's like in real life. Because sometimes test charts are all good and great for testing sharpness of lenses, but sometimes it doesn't always translate to the real world. So I hope this video was helpful. Don't worry, I will do a vignetting separate video test so we can have a look at what sort of vignetting we're getting from the lens. But I'm inclined to say that there is some vignetting going off at F4.5. If we just quickly look at this, just zoom out at 25%, and this is at F8. It's brighter. You notice how it's darker? That tends to be a telltale sign of possible vignetting going off, because obviously we've changed the aperture slightly and it's a lot brighter. So hang on a minute, just so what we can see is, sorry, I think I got that confused a little bit. So that's EOS R at F4.5, and you can see it's quite dark around the corners. Now if we go to the F8 version, you can see uniformly it's more brighter. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful looking at the lens sharpness test card. Again, I will do another video looking at real world examples for you. Sometimes test cards don't always give you a good idea of how the lens will perform in real world situations. So I'll do that tomorrow, and I hope to see you in another video. Thank you. So continuing on, we're just going to have a look at vignetting on this lens. So obviously we're talking about the Sigma 500mm prime lens from 2005. It is an F4.5 apertured lens. Its full title is APO DG EX HSM, hypersonic motored, so it's quite quick at focusing in terms of photographs. And we're here to look at the vignetting properties on a EOS R full frame camera and a 90D crop sensor camera APS-C. So I want to demonstrate in this video the effect of vignetting on this particular lens. What you will find is quite often third-party lenses aren't quite as sharp across the entirety of the frame, especially in the corners. So obviously there is a compromise there, but obviously you've got to remember third-party lenses are a lot cheaper than their main manufacturer counterparts like the likes of Canon, Sony and Nikon, and obviously other smaller brands as well. But that's the trade-off, because obviously these third-party lenses are a lot cheaper, and obviously they haven't spent as much in their development of producing these lenses. So obviously there is a price difference, and obviously there is going to be some sort of trade-off, whether it be down to autofocus speed, whether it be down to sharpness in the corners. Generally speaking, those are the main two areas, as well as optical stabilizer. I tend to find that the main manufacturers, in my case Canon, tend to be or do outperform the Sigma counterparts. Now some of you may say that's not true with the Art series lenses that Sigma have made, and that may be the true, because obviously Sigma has upped their game. But I think when it comes to their telephoto lenses, they have made some compromises. So we're going to have a look at the vignetting here, so we can have a look in more detail. So we've got apertures of f4.5, 5.6 and f8 and f16 respectively. We've got the same apertures on the crop sensor, but what you'll find in crop sensor lenses, cameras, such as the 90D, 80D, 70D, any sort of APS-C based camera, is your vignetting will be significantly less so, because in effect the sharpest part of the lens is used on those sensors. Obviously you will see a little bit, but very little, but it'll be more obvious in full frame. So first of all, let's get to the examples here. So we've got the EOS R image here at f4.5. Now if we have a look, obviously you can see there is some darkening of the corners as I'm moving around with the cursor around here, here and here, here and here. Obviously I used a light source more to the left here, so obviously we've got a light box around here projecting the light here onto the wallpaper. I decided to use the wallpaper as a good basis to figure out vignetting, because it's white and it gives you a good idea. So obviously you've got your darker corner areas here, which shows the vignetting going off. Now as we move down the apertures, because obviously the iris of the aperture is getting smaller and smaller, giving us more depth of field, but also it improves the vignetting significantly, and also the result of that is more sharpness as well. So we're going to look at the images. I'm just going to briefly run through the 4 images on the EOS R full frame, which is 30 megapixels, and you'll quite obviously see the main differences here. So let's move down to 5.6, just visually look at it as it is. So obviously it's brighter, and literally it's almost gone, the vignetting. So let's move to f8, which there will be a slight improvement, and uniformly I think it's got rid of most of it, if not all of it. To my eye, I don't see much of a vignetting there going off at f8. It's a vast improvement from f4.5. So let's just go back to f4.5. Here we've got the darkness in the corners, and let's just jump to f8, and uniformly it's got more than acceptable. That's great, that's fantastic. We'll just have a look at f16, but there won't be much of a difference there. Hardly any difference there, so it's pretty much the same as at f8. So let's have a look at APS-C. So this is the 90D that I've been using to do this test. And let's have a look at F4.5. So obviously you can see that there's more magnification. Just remember, on a 500mm lens with the 1.6 crop factor, you're going to talk about turning this lens into an 800mm. So clearly, looking at this image, I can clearly see that we have lost some sharpness. But that's the effect of the APC sensor on this particular lens. That will improve when we come down in apertures. But I thought it'd be helpful for you guys to see the differences. So let's have a look at 5.6, because there will be an improvement there. Obviously you can see the corners has got significantly brighter and it looks reasonably okay. Let's have a look at F8. Again, it's got brighter, and I think the vignetting is pretty much gone. And just have a look at F16 quickly. And there's very minimal difference in terms of improvement. So I just want to jump back to the EOS R first of all. Now we've had a look at that. So obviously we've got some dark corners, but I'll focus more on the left because the light falls off a little bit on that side. So let's just zoom in to the bottom. So we've zoomed into the bottom at F4.5. Now I want to show the difference at F8. We just zoom back down there. Now we're at 66% there. So let's just go back. That's F4.5 on the EOS R. Go back to F8 on the EOS R. You can see there's significantly some improvement on sharpness. For those of you who would like me to pixel peep, let's go to 200%. Obviously it's not fantastic at 200%. And then go back to the corners, dark corner at 200%. So obviously you can see there's significant amount of darkness in this corner versus F8. But what's happening at F8 is we're getting a uniformed improvement across the frame. We look at the F4.5 image. Let's just zoom out again to 25%. Obviously that's how it is in terms of vignetting. You can clearly see that we have dark corners. We got to F8, a big improvement. So let's jump to the APS-C, which was at F4.5. So that's filling the frame there, 4.5, so you can see we have some darkness here. I think it's nowhere near what we've got here on the EOS R. Obviously the EOS R is full frame and it uses more of the lens. The APS-C isn't using as much, so it's not as dark. But then let's just compare the APS-C to F8, where it literally changes things. One important thing I would like to point out on APS-C on this particular lens is I've noticed that at F4.5 sharpness is quite poor. If we just have a look at this, I'd like to go into the center here so you can have a look at 100% there, and then if we go at F8 in here 100%, just want to show the difference here on APS-C. So it looks reasonably in focus and fairly sharp at F8. Look at the difference at F4.5. We have lost a ton of sharpness in the center. Now I want to do the same test on the EOS R, because this is a good demonstration of what's going on. So if we just go into the center here where these lines are, 100% there. Now that's F4.5. Now I want to do the same thing at F8. 100%. So let's go back to the F4.5. Doesn't look quite as sharp, but it's not anywhere near as bad as it was on APS-C, the 90D. Remember, the 90D is 32 megapixels, and the EOS R that I'm using here with the adapter is 30 megapixels. So that's f4.5 there. Let's just have a look at the difference at f8 on full frame, and it looks a lot sharper. However, if we go back to f4.5 at full frame on the EOS R and have a look at it and compare that to 5.6, this is 5.6, this is the second image here, and then there is a slight improvement there. So we've got a slight improvement on full frame. Then at 5.6 it's slightly better, obviously, and then f8 it's even better. We can have a look at f16 if you'd like to see if there's any main difference there, but there won't be much of a difference between f16 and f8. Very similar. We're not introducing diffraction because we're not going to any crazy sort of aperture like f22 or f32. So that's the main difference there in terms of sharpness regarding the apertures. But I think you can get away with f4.5 on this lens on full frame. But let's change that scenario on APS-C, where we got the focal length equivalent of 800 millimeters. Now, as you can see, it looks pretty bad there. Now, if we have a look at f5.6, we need to go into 100%. So if we just have a look, that's f4.5 there on APS-C for 800 millimeters, remember. One thing I'd like to make a point of, all these pictures are on ISO 500, so it's quite a low ISO. So that's f4.5 on APS-C, that's f5.6, we've got an improvement. If you have a look, that's 4.5, 5.6, slightly better. Have a look at f8, better still, and there will be a slight improvement at f16. So f4.5, f5.6, f8. Interesting, very interesting. f16, we are getting diffraction coming into the shot here. So at f16 the image actually gets worse. So let's just have a look at that again. f4.5, 5.6, f8, it's better, and then we get some softness at f16. That's interesting. You learn something new every day. Back to the EOS R, which is full frame. We're at 100%. Just want to make that point. We're looking at 100%. So 100%. We're having a look there at f4.5 on full frame. We have some improvement, f5.6. And then we have some better improvement, f8. And f16 is pretty much the same. No major improvement. So before we wrap this video up, I just want to zoom back out so you guys can have a look at the main differences of vignetting from a more zoomed out perspective, because it will be helpful for you guys to see the main differences from a more zoomed out perspective. The reason I've been doing these tests is so I can give everyone a good idea of how vignetting and how the lens performs. I've done many tests. Please check out all the videos if you're interested in this lens, because as a budget lens, this is a really bargain of a lens that you can purchase off eBay. I got my copy for around £1,500. You can probably get them as low as £1,200, but please be mindful that some retailers might be selling some poor copies that are not in great condition. So let's just finish the video off looking at the vignetting, because obviously we've looked at a bit at a little bit of the sharpness, but I just wanted to go into more depth onto the vignetting in this video. So that's full frame EOS R at 30 megapixels, F4.5. Then we move up to, or move down as it were, to F5.6. Then it's F8, major improvement at F8. F16, there may be a slight difference there, but it's pretty much the same as F8. So then we look at APS-C, the 90D, 32 megapixel sensor. So obviously it's more zoomed in and it appears to my eye less sharp. Then we're looking at F5.6, that we have some improvement in the corner significantly. There's still a little bit of vignetting going off. F8, we seem to have got the majority of the vignetting has vanished. And then for some reason, I think diffraction is playing a little part in this image, where we've got some diffraction, which generally speaking we are losing some sharpness in the image. I hope this was helpful to you guys to understand about the vignetting on this particular lens. This information that I'm giving you can apply to other third-party lenses as well, so just be mindful that sometimes the main manufacturer lenses perform better, not just on sharpness, not just on whether it can achieve a tack sharp image, not just on autofocus performance, but also in terms of the entirety of the frame. Are we getting a uniformed image in terms of its exposure? And are we getting any artifacts in that lens that is going to affect the quality of our image, such as pincushion distortion, barrel distortion, vignetting, autofocus performance, sharpness in the corners, sharpness in the center. These are all things you need to take into consideration when looking at a lens. You want to make sure it gives you good all-round performance in all those areas. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope the demonstrations and the tests have informed you about this particular lens. Please check out all of the videos that I've done on autofocus performance in video, sharpness of images, vignetting obviously in this video, and I will do one further one on sharpness on bricks, because bricks gives you an idea on contrast and sharpness, and I'll do that tomorrow for you guys. But thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful. Have a nice day, and as always, subscribe to the channel and like the video if it helped you out. Hello everyone, we've got another testing video of the Sigma prime lens that we've got here, but I'll just talk you briefly through the lens. So I just want to talk you through the Sigma lens. I just wanted to give you a closer look at it. Obviously I've got other videos for that as well, but I just want to show you the various options on this lens, what it does, and hopefully this little segment will be helpful, and hopefully it'll give you more of an insight on what I've been doing with this lens as well. So the lens is actually called a Sigma 500mm prime. It doesn't zoom. It's got an aperture of F4.5 APO EX-DG hypersonic motor, and a lot of times that's abbreviated for HSM. So it's a 500mm solidly built steel constructed metal lens, and it has a drop-in 46mm filter holder which you can put in there, such as polarizers or ND filters. It has a dial for adjusting the polarizer if you've got a polarizer in there, and it also has some focus options on there with the limiter. So we've got a limiter switch there for full 8 meters to infinity and 4 to 8 meters. That allows you to adjust the focus for animals that are far away, and obviously you can adjust the switch has a autofocus and manual focus switch there. You can adjust the tripod collar by adjusting this knob on there, and obviously you can make it vertical or horizontal. It doesn't click. A lot of big cameras have a clicking option that allows you to tell you audibly when something's in horizontal or like landscape or horizontal mode. The actual tripod mount is nice to hold. It's got grooves in there, so it sort of fits your hand, and it's got multiple screwing options along there for attaching to your tripod. The actual lens comes with a solid lens hood, which is made out of metal, and it has rubber going around the end of it. The only thing that I am not too happy with is the length of it, because it's only 3 inches long, 3 to 4 inches long. Most of the manufacturers like Canon and Nikon and Sony produce lens hoods which are a lot longer, and that stops flare coming into the actual lens and ruining any shots you may be doing. Obviously the tripod collar is adjustable with a tightening knob, and essentially also there is a little rotating attachment where you can attach straps and that sort of thing to it. Its minimum focus is 4.5 meters, which obviously is quite long, which means it's ideally suited for anything like wildlife or sports that are far away. But I just wanted to illustrate this lens and just show you it in brief before we look at the images, and I hope this little segment was helpful. So without further ado, we want to have a look at the examples in this video. I've done a lot of charts. Let me just get the chart for you. Here's one of the charts that I've been using to test the lens sharpness. We've got a lens sharpness test card here. We've got a colour chart here, and another test chart here as well. We've been looking to try and test the sharpness of this lens. So what I've decided to do is give you some real world examples here as well as an alternative, because sometimes test charts are all well and good, but I think sometimes real world examples give you a better idea on how the lens performs. So without further ado, let's have a look at the examples. Okay, welcome to the examples of the Sigma 500 prime lens that we're looking at and reviewing. So I just want to give you some real world images, because obviously I've done some tests on the test charts and showed you the results from that. But sometimes test charts are all well and good, but they don't always translate into real world images. Sometimes you might do the test slightly wrong or incorrect, and it might give you a false reading. So going out in the real world and testing your camera and your lens is always advisable. So that's what I've done. What I've done is I've taken a selection of some images from my back garden, so you can have a look at the images yourself and get an idea on the quality. So I'm going to talk you through the images, tell you what apertures they're at, and it's up to you to make your mind up. So looking at the first image, we have the EOS R at F4.5, and I just want to zoom into it so you can pixel peep all you want and have a look at these images in more detail. First of all, let's talk about the bokeh. The bokeh looks fantastic and great. You can see the we've got another model duck behind this particular duck. This is a water feature if you're wondering what it is, and it's blown out beautifully. We do have like a pond waterfall system at the back behind this, and I'll show you that particular in the video that we'll do later on. I just want to show you some examples of video as well. But in this picture you can see that the background is blown beautifully out on the EOS R. 30 megapixels, these are JPEG images. It looks fantastic and great detail in the bokeh. Zooming in into the image itself, we can see that we've got some good sharpness there. We've got certainly a lot of detail showing up on the pole of the actual umbrella. Obviously the duck's nicely rendered and looks sharp enough to me. And obviously you can see a lot of detail on that pole. So let's move on to the next image, which is, I try to get them in comparable, so I had to move the lens a little bit further back on the 90D, the APS-C camera. It works out at 800 millimeters because of the 1.6 times crop. So you just got to remember to magnify the magnification, the focal length of your lens. So it gives us 800 millimeters, and this is at f4.5 as well as the previous image I just showed you. And looking at that, we have not got a lot of detail. Obviously the pole that's holding the umbrella looks blurry. I'll just zoom in there so you can see that in more detail. Doesn't look very sharp at all. So, and the bokeh, if we just talk about the bokeh briefly, it looks very busy, not very pleasant. It's similar sort of vantage point, so it should look very similar to the full frame, but it doesn't. And I don't really like how it looks. I know the lighting did change slightly, so we've got a bit of sunlight coming through the clouds, but I just don't think this image is a very good image at f4.5. Moving on to the next image, we're looking at f8 on the EOS R. It looks a lot sharper. We've still got nice bokeh. Obviously you can see the duck in the background there, but it still looks pleasant. We can go right in there. That's 66% there. Really good detail. Going to 100%, even more detail on the pole. And it renders the image nicely. I love the contrast. The contrast is fantastic, and I don't see any problems there. Another image at f8, it certainly looks a lot sharper. We've got some sharpness along the beak of the bird here. It's brought a bit more into focus in terms of the pole holding the umbrella. Bokeh fantastic, if I'm honest with you. So it does improve the image significantly at f8 on APS-C, where you probably could get away with f4.5 on the EOS R, or probably 5.6 will probably be fine as well. So let's look at the next image. So obviously we've got an eagle statue here. This is the EOS R at f4.5. It looks really nice. I think it's quite well rendered. Contrast is nice. It looks sharp enough to me. The eye, if we zoom right in there to 100%, there's a bit of softness here, but it's not bad. It's quite reasonable. Looking at the image that we've got with the 90D, now I did realise that the sun did change a little bit, so obviously it got a little bit brighter because we briefly had a bit of sun come through the clouds. But looking at this image, focus is terrible. It's not sharp at f4.5. Bokeh doesn't look that much better either. So I would say using f4.5 aperture on this particular 500 prime, or probably it may apply to other older primes, because this is a legacy lens. You got to remember that it came out in 2005. It's 15 years old, this lens is, and I don't think it's capable of dealing with the resolutions of modern cameras. Full frame, it seems reasonable and quite okay, but when it comes to APS-C, I think it struggles. So let's have a look at the next image. So this, if I'm not mistaken, I'll just double check the file info data. If you're wondering how to do that in Photoshop, just go to File and bring up file info. This is the EOS R at f8. Looks really nice. Bokeh looks fine. It looks very sharp, a lot sharper than it was at f4.5. If we go back there, as you can see, it's quite soft. Here it's sharper. So at f8 it gets better, full frame does, on this particular lens. Let's have a look at the next image, which is APS-C, the 90D, f4.5. Again, it's not terribly sharp here. Let me just remind myself what the details of the actual image is. So it's f8 at obviously at 800 millimeters. The the sharpness has got better. So if we just go back to F4.5 and then we compare it to F8, it's sharper, it's better. There's no doubt using APS-C at F8 should result with some good images. I would probably say avoid cropping if you can, because all you're going to do is lose detail by doing so. So let's look at the next image. So here we have a garden gnome, I call it the Gandalf wizard in my garden. This is the EOS R at F4.5. If we look at this image in more detail, I think there's a bit of softness around the eye there. So let's have a look at the next image, which is APS-C 90D F4.5. You can see it there for yourself. It's just soft. The images are soft. It's not quality, and I don't like it. So let's move to the next image, which is going to be the EOS R at F8. We've got more sharpness, looks better, the contrast is better. Just keep in mind that there was a little bit of difference with the lighting changing, but to be honest, comparing both, I would certainly say the EOS R produces better results with this 500 prime lens. Okay, let's have a look at the 90D at F8. Now it looks a damn sight better. If we just compare the images here, look, that's at F4.5. It's really soft. Doesn't look fantastic. But if we change that to F8, then certainly a lot better. Now it's probably not super sharp, but it's certainly more than acceptable. So my conclusion here is using the 90D at F4.5 in this lens isn't a good idea, because we're just getting horrible softness appearing, which would suggest that the lens isn't capable of dealing with super high megapixel cameras as well as it can do with full frame cameras. So let's check out the videos examples, but that's my roundup of these examples. I hope these examples helped you out and give you a fair comparison, and thanks for watching. Okay, I thought I'd give you a few more examples before I show you the videos. So first of all, I've got some duck models in my garden. I thought it'd be a good idea to take some pictures of those and show you potential sharpness on both cameras. But one thing that I forgot to mention was I'm using ISO 500 on both cameras, both the EOS R and the 90D. So while some of the test charts videos that I did was using 2500 ISO, so obviously you might want to check those out just to check out how good these cameras are at high ISOs. I thought I'd do a lower ISO test as well in the real world, so you get an idea of you know, the capabilities of these cameras in the ISOs as well. So I've got a few more examples I just want to run through, going through the apertures and telling you about what I think about the particular lens in regards to modern day cameras. I do think legacy camera lenses are not as good as the more modern day ones. The reason for that is the new ones are actually optimized for the higher megapixels of the modern day cameras, where the old ones were not, because these high megapixels cameras didn't exist back in the day. So just remember that whenever you think about picking up an older lens, it may not be able to give you the resolution that you want. So here we have another duck model image that I took in the back of my garden. This is the EOS R. So it's 30 megapixels at f4.5 on the lens, and it does render a good image on full frame. I just don't think it's quite as good on APS-C. So this is f4.5. We'll just quickly compare that to the 90D, similar sort of image, and it's just a little bit soft here. I can see that already without even zooming in. So let's go back to EOS R and zoom in right in there at 50%. You can see the eye is nicely in focus. It's not tack sharp, but it's very close to it. so it looks quite nice. If we look at a 90D, zoom in again at 50%, it's soft all the way, all around it really. The only thing that seems to be a little bit in focus is maybe the beak, but the eye isn't. And it almost looks like it's got camera shake going off, but I used a 10-second timer on both cameras on a tripod, so there's no camera shake at all going on here. So as you can see, it's not fantastically great. I think the shutter speed was around 300th of a second, so it was fairly fast. And at some points in time, I think the shutter speed was actually around 2,000th of a second, so camera shake should not be happening. It just looks soft at f4.5, so let's have a look at the next image, which will be the EOS R at f8. Looking there, the only reason you might see a little bit of softness going off is because I think one of the plants was in front of it, but it is pretty much, you can see good detail, good contrast in this image, so it looks pretty decent. Let's have a look at the 90D image here, where I think it's tighter in, and that, as you can see, that plant there that I'm just going over with this cursor was in the previous image. It's actually over the actual duck. So looking at this, obviously it's a lot sharper at f8. It's rendering good image contrast, and it looks fairly reasonably sharp. It's not super tack sharp, and as I've said in previous videos, I wouldn't want to crop on 800mm. There's no need to. Once you've got an 800mm, there's no need to crop at all. And you know, you can always get closer to your subject matter. I know some experts and professionals will say you can't. There's always a way. You can always, you know, use hides. You can always camouflage yourself to blend in with your environment. Those are other techniques of getting closer to your subject matter if you're trying to do so. So let's have a look at the next image, which is another white duck I've got. This will be at f4.5. Does look a bit dark. I think we were getting some heavy cloud cover coming through, and that's why it looks a lot darker. But it's still rendering a good image on the EOS R. You know, there might be a tiny bit of softness going off around the eye, but it still looks good detail. You can still see good detail of the, you know, the duck model regarding the feathers on the actual duck. So have a look at the 90D at on f4.5. It's rendering some of the detail, but it looks a little bit soft. If you're doubting that, let's zoom right in there, and you can see there certainly is some softness going off there. That's at 200%. Sometimes I think that's a bit too much. 100% looks better, and you can see there is softness all around going on. So let's have a look at the next image. This is the EOS R at f8, and we're getting certainly some good detail there, and it looks quite sharp to me. Looking at the next image, which is the 90D at f8, and the difference is amazing versus f4.5. Let's go back to the f4.5 image on the 90D, and I just want to zoom out just a little bit. That's the f8 on the 90D. It looks sharp, it looks reasonable, and it looks okay. But at f4.5, it just looks soft all around. So what I'm taking away from this is that APS-C is not fantastic on older prime lenses. I would recommend you stick to using full frame cameras on older prime lenses. This might be applicable to the Canon 500 IS version 1 lens. If you've got that old lens, I probably would say avoid using APS-C if you can, and if you have to use APS-C because you're trying to get closer to your subject matter, don't crop. Please don't crop, because you'll just magnify any sort of imperfections in the lens. So let's have a look at the video, and we'll see you later in the next video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I hope to see you soon. Right, we're filming on the 90D APS-C test. We're going to try the focus test again. It's about 15 meters away, so we just need to test minimum focus 4.5 meters to subject matter. So let's just change the focus barrel. Just try that test again. 4.5 meters to subject matter. Let's try the infinity test. Infinity to subject matter. Infinity test again. Again, there's no image stabilization on this lens, so whenever I touch this lens or camera, there is a slight amount of camera shake. we just want to do minimum focus test to subject matter, 4.5 meters to subject matter, which is about 15 meters away. So let's just do that test. Let's repeat the test, but do it from infinity to subject matter, which is about 15 meters away. On the 500mm prime lens, this is the Sigma 4.5 APO EXDG hypersonic motor lens. We are on the EOS R doing our focus tests. So let's just try again at 4.5 meters to subject matter. And let's just try again at infinity to subject matter. Now the camera shake you're seeing is because I'm touching the lens and there's no image stabilization on this lens. So unfortunately it isn't as smooth as we'd like it to be. Let me just try again. And let's do the infinity test to subject matter. So that's on the EOS R. So we want to repeat this test on APS-C. But there you go, that's the test of the Sigma Prime 500mm. So instead of me talking, I'll let you enjoy the scenery and you know, enjoy the scene. So welcome to this final video in this series of videos I've been doing all about the Sigma Prime lens that I've got. So this is a review and overview of the Sigma 500mm F4.5 APO DG EX HSM hypersonic mounted lens, and I'm going to do a roundup of some brick images we've got here. Just in brief, just to let you know that it's a 2005 prime lens that Sigma brought out to try and compete with the likes of Canon Nikon and Sony, I believe. And what you'll find is this lens is pretty good for the price. You can pretty much pick it up for around £1,500 off eBay. Yes, there is a newer version of it which has been released in the past couple of years, which is an F4 variant, which does include optical stabilizer. This particular lens has no image stabilization, so you do need to take that into account, which means you probably will be relying on tripods and monopods. But this is an overview of the quality that you can achieve from this particular lens. You've got to remember it is a 2005 lens, and what that means is that older lenses really struggle with newer cameras, mainly because of the density of the megapixels, especially on APS-C cameras. And if you don't know what APS-C is, I am referring to crop sensor cameras with a smaller sensor. And because it's a smaller sensor, they have to cram the pixels in tighter and they're smaller. This has the added benefit of cropping your image and giving you more magnification, but it also has a disadvantage where full frame gathers more light and it's a bigger sensor. But APS-C is a smaller sensor and it gathers less light. So there is a trade-off. So we're going to have a look at some images of brickwork that I've taken here. One's on the EOS R, which is a 30 megapixel full frame camera, adapted with the adapter on. This is an EF Sigma lens for Canon, so it's a Canon EF mount. And also the 90D, which is a crop sensor camera, and that's megapixel is rated at 32 megapixels on that particular sensor. So it's an APS-C sensor. So we're just going to briefly have a look at the brickwork here and see if we can determine if there's any sort of distortion going off. Now typically you will have two different types of distortion, but I'll go into that shortly. But first of all, let's address the image quality. So here we have an image at F4.5. That's the aperture, which is a large aperture that lets lots of light in. And we've taken a picture of the brickwork to try and determine contrast, have a look at the sharpness and see if we're getting a good image from F4.5 from this lens. And let's have a look at the quality by zooming in. So we want to have a look at the center first of all. So let's go in there at about 50% there. And I think we're getting good contrast, getting good tones there, and it looks reasonably sharp. I wouldn't say it's completely tack sharp, but it's not far off, and it looks pretty reasonable. However, when I start to look into the corners here, to me it just looks a little bit on the soft side. So what we're determining here is that in the corners it's not completely sharp. In the centre, I wouldn't say it's tack sharp, I'd just say it's sharp. And then if we go to the top corner here, while it looks reasonably sharp, it's just not completely tack sharp. And obviously at the edges here, it doesn't look too fantastic. But obviously when you zoom out, it's looks reasonable. And I would say that's certainly usable. So let's have a look at the next image, which is at f8. Obviously, on my previous video, I addressed vignetting, and we are getting vignetting. So at f8, that vignetting is pretty much eliminated. So obviously the image is improved, and so has the contrast improved. Now if we go to the center again, it looks sharper. Again, I wouldn't say it's completely tack sharp. I wouldn't say it's super tack sharp, but I would say it's a huge improvement and looks pretty good. So if we compare the center with the 4.5, let's just go into where that hole is there, and then we have a look at f8. It does look better, you know, the colours seem more vivid and it does look sharper to me. So that's my assessment of the EOS R full frame. Let's have a look at the APC image we have at f4.5. Starting off, obviously, we still have some vignetting going off, even with the APS-C being in the majority of the actual centre of the lens. But looking at the image, it looks pretty bad, if I'm honest with you. It's not even sharp. Things are quite blurry to me. The corners are absolutely atrocious. But if let's go in there, we're having a look at 50%. I don't need to zoom in any more than that. It's awash with blurriness. It looks terrible. Sharpness is non-existent. And if we try moving down to corners, I suspect it will get even worse. There's very little contrast going off. There's no sharpness to speak of. It's pretty much almost like you're looking through a bad pair of glasses. The top here is just not sharp, it's blurry. And this is APS-C on the 90D, which has 32 megapixels. Obviously the megapixels are more crammed in. Just remember it is 800 millimeters. But my assessment, as I've said in the previous videos, is that sharpness is not very good on APS-C at f4.5. In fact, it's so bad that I wouldn't want to use it at that aperture, even if you needed to gather more light. You'll get away with it on full frame, but I don't believe you would be able to do that on APS-C. And let's just have a look at f8. So I would say there's a vast improvement compared to full frame when you're comparing f4.5 to f8 on APS-C versus f4.5 to f8 on full frame. The difference on APS-C is night and day. Looking at this, obviously again, I do think these older lenses are struggling with the higher megapixel counts. You've got to remember, when this lens was made, you're talking cameras such as the 1D Mark III that had maybe 10 megapixels. Now we've got cameras with 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 megapixels. And I don't think the older lenses are able to deal with the high megapixel count of the modern day cameras. So, you know, obviously this is a f8 and it looks reasonable. I would not say it's tack sharp either. I would say it's nowhere near what I would consider croppable. I would not want to crop this image because if you translate this into the real world, you are not going to get absolute tack sharp images. Sure, if you start zooming out, I don't think you're going to know the difference. But if you're a perfectionist and you're looking for the absolute sharpest imagery you can get, I think you may feel disappointed with this lens. So let's talk about distortion. There's two types of distortion, which is barrel distortion, which applies to wide angle lenses and zoom lenses typically, and pincushion distortion, which is applicable to telephoto lenses and high mega zoom lenses, such as the Tamrons and Sigmas 150 to 600s. So I'll just show you a graph here of what pincushion distortion looks like. As you can see, it bends the lines. Distortion in lenses is bending light to a certain way, and obviously you can see this, it's pinching, hence the word pincushion distortion. It's pinching the image. So if we translate that to our f8 image and we zoom out, we are looking at the lines in the bricks, because brickwork is a really good test for lenses to see if there's any sort of distortion going off. Now I'm looking at the distortion here for pincushion distortion and I see very little. The lines look very straight to me, so I don't think this lens suffers with any major issues regarding pincushion distortion. But we're more than happy to look at the APS-C one. Again, I don't think there's any distortion going on there. Just remember, APS-C cameras magnify the center. So instead of getting a 500mm lens, because it's a 1.6 crop, you apply the 1.6 to the actual focal length, and we're actually at 800mm at f8. Obviously this lens can go to f4.5 at 800mm, but again, if we just go back to the previous image, I would like to zoom out so you can see that for yourself. So if we just zoom out, make sure the pictures are the same in terms of the size. So that's f8 and that's f4.5. Clearly you can see there's a difference there, and it just doesn't look sharp at f4.5, so I would not recommend using this lens on APS-C if possible, or if you're going to use it on APS-C, stick to f8 in terms of your aperture. Now if we look at EOS R, this is a full frame camera, we can clearly see that there is some loss of sharpness when we go to f4.5, but it's not dramatic. So let's just zoom out of that so you can see that. So that's f8 and that's f4.5. They look very similar, and you're only going to notice the softness if you start pixel peeping into the actual image. But I think you would be happy with this lens on a full frame camera. No issues there. However, when we start looking at APS-C, it just feels like it's just far too soft to be usable. And let's just check the f8 image just so you've got a quick comparison, and it's night and day. So that's f8, 4.5, f8, 4.5. So let's just go back to our pincushion distortion image here. So essentially, if I was to see lots of distortion, I would expect the lines of these bricks here to basically be doing that, a bit of a curve, even a minor curve. But from what I can tell, I don't see any sort of pincushion distortion there. There may be a slight amount there, but it's so small it's not detectable by my eyes. But what I would also say is you're more than likely to get pincushion distortion on zoom lenses, as well as barrel distortion, which affects wide angle shots on wide angle lenses. However, prime lenses don't typically suffer from distortion a lot because they've got one fixed focal length, and the manufacturers have focused all their skills and research and techniques to try and get that prime lens to be the best it can be. So I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time for watching these videos. It is a good lens, and I do think you would be very happy with it. And thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, it really helps me. Please don't leave without doing that, because I need your help to grow this channel.